We are joined now by may or may not be a plant in the audience from Coach Rhule, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic.
Yeah.
Mitch, what's going on?
Mitch the plant. That's it. Right?
What's going on? No, not at all. In fact, I guess he wanted that question. He seemed like he was loaded up and ready to go on it. But at first, when he started, he didn't. I didn't ask the question. He jumped in. I was wondering. Okay, so who's this directed at here? Who made him? Who ruffled his feathers on this whole topic? I guess it was probably more stuff outside of Nebraska and just like snarky comments that were coming, which I think in this scenario you pretty much had to expect when he said what he said. Like, yeah, there was a way that Matt Rhule said that when he made the comment 2 weeks ago, but you don't really expect that people who just jump in on any subject in college football are going to quite get the nuance of how it was intended.
Yeah, it's interesting because when Ravi brought it, and I remember this show specifically because it got kind of volatile. And I told Rob, he goes, "There's something I want to get back to that Coach Rhule said yesterday that's getting under my skin." And we went to break and we came back and I was like, "What's that?" And it was the Raiola thing. And I was like, and I told him, I didn't get that.
You didn't realize it was a thing.
Yeah, I didn't get that, And I said, well, I mean, would we have felt better if he'd have said 218 or 226 or 260? Like, he could have number. Like, I honestly didn't get it. And then it turned to something. But clearly, when he said, it was one of those times, Mitch, and you know him, right? It's one of those times where I felt like he used the kind of the disappointment more than the chastising or kind of wrist slapping, where I think it actually bugged him for whatever reason, but I thought it was powerful because it showed like this human component, because he said there's already enough ire out there. Like, I don't want to be part of it, right? Where there was something that happened in there with him that I thought it was powerful, man. It's one of the reasons why I like him as much as I do.
Right. I looking back though, I don't know that there was really any way to control it when he threw out a number. Like, it was going to be interpreted in a very remedial way by some people. You hear that number and you don't really care about how it was presented. Just the fact that it was put out there, and that's kind of rare for a college football coach to do. All of a sudden, people were going to run with it, and it's just. I think you if he didn't expect that, I'm surprised, because he's generally very savvy. And he even said, everything I say is very marked, and there's a reason for why he says things in the way that he says things. But in this case, I think if he wanted to avoid what happened, then you probably just don't put a number out there. And if you had just stuck to the Dylan is working on his body composition and it's an important thing for him this offseason, then I don't know that you would have had the same conversation around that 2 weeks ago. And then there probably wouldn't have been the conversation yesterday, because it just would. And I was out there watching at Pro Day when he came over from practice and was getting ready to throw. And first thing I thought was, well, he looks fit. He looks really good. I think he looks stronger and in a little better shape than what we saw last season. I don't even know if that becomes something that we're talking about at all, if that whole conversation hadn't come up a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, Mitch, I'd like to think you're right, but I do and maybe I just run in different circles in terms of maybe I consume too much stuff online or whatever. Like, that's entirely possible. But I see a lot, people weren't making jokes about Dylan Raiola and his weight only after the number came out. Like, this is something that I'd heard about Raiola, and people would sort of make jokes or snarky comments sort of since he got on campus. And if he wore a sweatshirt that fit a certain way, people would make a comment. And then he wore something else, they're like, oh, he's in shape. It's sort of been a narrative for a while. And I guess that sort of I agree that if you don't put a number on it, it probably never gets to this point. But I also think that people were sort of making it a thing no matter what.
Yeah, you're probably right. It goes back. Does it go back to his wardrobe? Is Dylan wearing like clothes from his sophomore year of high school that he should put away just because he's naturally gotten bigger?
Not 15 anymore, right?
Yeah, right. I don't know. Like I think this is all going to be something that is a big nothing when it gets to the season, because people are going to see him when they got the opportunity to see him this spring, whether that's on April 26th or it's in footage that comes out from practices. Like there's going to be an opportunity for media to go in tomorrow. And I think you're going to see that he's in pretty good shape. And like for all of the stuff that Dylan has taken on, and I mean, like becoming the quarterback that he is and going through the training regimen, all of the commitment that he's made, the work that he has to do in this area, I think is pretty minor. If we're talking about like his body composition and it comes down to just like reshaping some things and maybe being like 5 to 10 pounds less than what he was in December, like he can accomplish that. I don't want to say it's easy, but for somebody who's 19, 20 years old and like has the athleticism that he does and is ready to work as hard as he is, like this is not a big hill to climb for him. And I think he'll tackle it with no trouble. And he's going to look physically like the quarterback that Nebraska wants to play that position when the season's ready to, well before the season's ready to go in August.
I know he loves this time of year because it's football, and it's football probably in as pure form as it's going to be, like during a calendar actually doing the sport. But I can't help but to think, as a guy that's kind of a culture builder and a leader and has kind of that presence around his peers, how much do you think he enjoys the opportunity to teach this staff, all the new guys on this staff, the way to do business that he once done at Nebraska from being a connectedness kind of standpoint, just getting a chance to coach the coaches?
Yeah, I think he definitely likes it. And I think you could hear when Mike Eckler visited with us this month that he picked up on how much Rhule likes that and how big of a part of the whole Nebraska football world it is. And when Phil Snow stood and talked to us and mentioned that Rhule held a 6-hour meeting where he was just going over all that is Nebraska football. We don't know what that meeting was about, but you don't have a 6-hour meeting if it's not something that you're really getting into.
When's the last time you went to a meeting where they had to bring in sandwiches or get some refreshments?
Oh, it's happened. It's happened. But it's been a minute. So yeah, when I asked Rhule yesterday about the transitioning to all the new players and what it's like for him to have 29 players who are new to this team going through practice this spring. And he said, that's not a problem. Like I don't think there's a big learning curve. The guys have acclimated well. He said, the bigger thing for me probably is adjusting to all of the new coaches on staff. So that's definitely a big part of his focus. And I think he enjoys that. I think he's getting into it here. But by the time you get to camp in August, like you don't want to feel like that's something that's new at all.
Mitch, we went down this rabbit hole Well, actually, I went down this rabbit hole yesterday in terms of red zone scoring, and Nebraska needed to be the number that I came up with yesterday. Last night was, another 2.8 points in the red zone, right? Just slightly less than a field goal. And then I got to thinking about, all right, special teams and will the defense come back and break even and all these just things that football nerds do. I think I landed the plane on, if special teams is just efficient, right? If you're 15 and 19 in field goals and you can net 40 yards and punt and you get 8 yards punt. I'm not even talking about anything Spectacular. Just go a season without a blocked punt. Have you allowed yourself to think, all things being equal, where Nebraska could be at the end of 2025? Or are we still taking these incremental steps in year 3?
Yeah, I've thought about it. I thought about it when Eckler came on board, and you looked through the numbers at Tennessee and what he'd accomplished. And the situation at Tennessee, honestly, he might have an easier time. Like, the challenge for him at Tennessee might have been greater to be the special teams coordinator than it is at Nebraska, because he had some other responsibilities on defense there that he's not going to have to take on at Nebraska. Nebraska has a big and capable defensive staff. They're not going to ask Eckler to, go coach outside linebackers for a week or to go help in that area. He can fully focus on special teams, and he's brought it up himself. I didn't know with I think you'd have to really dig in to like see this evidence yourself. I didn't, and I'd heard the conversation that Josh Heupel at Tennessee didn't use starters on special teams, and then you heard Eckler actually say it in his time with the media the first time he visited with us a couple of weeks ago. So that's not going to be the case at Nebraska. Like, Nebraska's cool throwing out receivers and DBs and all kinds of starters on the line, even in the kicking game. So I think he's set up to not necessarily, you should start with that kind of efficiency that you discussed. Like, let's get to that point before you get greedy. But I think that their special teams can be like a net positive for them, not just like a break even point. And if that happens and you plug that into the kind of football that Nebraska's played over the first 2 seasons for Matt Rhule, 13 games out of 25 decided by 1 score. That's where special teams comes in. That's where you change outcomes of games based on going from inefficient to efficient, or in an even better scenario, like above efficient, like highly efficient, effective, like game changing. Yeah, even if they can just be what you discussed, Damon, you're talking about what?
Yeah.
4 or 5 more wins over 2 years. So like a couple of wins next season that might not have happened if you were bad on special teams.
That's crazy. Mitch, it's kind of funny because we were having this conversation about sort of whether we like this year's roster better than last year's roster, right? And that's where this special teams and this whole conversation sort of started, because we go, well, we actually really liked last year's roster, and it sort of feels like they underachieved a little bit. And so I was getting into red zone conversions and touchdown rate in the red zone conversions and stuff like that. And we didn't even really get to like getting off the field on 3rd down or converting 3rd downs on offense or anything like that. And it kind of just landed on, after all that, what you just talked about. It'd be like, hey, if special teams just aren't horribly detrimental to your health, we're probably talking about an 8-win team last year.
So even with the offensive lulls and
all the other crap,
all
that
the
we get mad
other
about,
stuff that happened where they couldn't get off the field on 3rd down, it's like
if you just get to not horrible on special teams, we're probably talking about a roster that achieved what we thought they were capable of.
Yeah, that's good context.
Yep. Iowa probably doesn't happen.
The number 1 game I said.
Yeah.
That's one. So then find me one other game, and I think you can do that, and then you're at 8 wins.
Yep.
I mean, Illinois is an easy one to point to.
I said
right.
Iowa doesn't even happen.
Yeah. Like there's – and so I just – I guess in that context, we did really like last year's roster, and I think we had more knowns. But I'm curious if you like how you feel about this year's roster sort of in comparison to what we saw last year. Like just the actual roster itself.
Yeah, I was having this conversation about the defense, so I'll kind of answer it with that. I think offensively, I'll start with the offense because I think there's a parallel. Looking at the wide receivers, and then looking at like Nebraska's linebacker group and probably the secondary and also the pass rushers on defense. So most of the defense, with the exception of like the interior line. What I think you have is a group that has more athleticism and big play potential. I think Nebraska can be a team that gets after the quarterback with the traditional positions that rush the passer more effectively than what you had in 2024. So in that sense, I like the roster in a way better. Like it might be more comfortable, like the 2024 roster. You might like have more knowns, like less volatility. But I think if this coaching staff can come close to getting out of these guys like what they have to give, like if they can, you don't have to like 100% maximize your potential. That's not maybe realistic, but just like get a lot, again, go back to being efficient. If they can do that, I think specifically at wide receiver and then all over the defense, almost the entire defense, they have a lot of like high end talent that wasn't necessarily in place a year ago. And some of it was in place, but it just wasn't ready to produce in that way. Like Vincent Shavers and Willis McGahee on the defense. Like those guys were young pups last year and who could flash in a moment. And now I think they're ready to be like consistent big play producers.
When you look at the roster and the floor versus the ceiling, and we dropped you in at a practice, and you only get to watch one group, and you got to finish. You got to have that fill the rest of the spring. You get the coaches or coach, and the position group. Who are you going with?
And what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to like
only get that content for the rest of the spring.
Okay. So I'm trying to find something that's really intriguing. I would go to either the linebackers or the wide receivers. I think that at linebacker, the two guys that I just mentioned being a year older and adding McCullough, and then if Javen Wright's healthy, and I don't know, like that's going to be something we find out. I don't know. Maybe Damon. Like, what is he?
I don't know.
Is he able to practice right now?
I don't.
Yeah, but if he is, and you add him to that mix at linebacker with the freshman from last year getting a year older, and McCullough's in that group, and I put, I think there's some gray area about exactly where you put Williams Nwaneri, but to me he's a defensive lineman. Like he fits with Braden's group, no matter what front they're going in, if it's a 3 or 4, like him and Keona Davis are up there. So I'd be interested in that too, for sure. But if it's just a position group like linebacker on defense, and I really, really like Rob Dvorak.
Me too.
So I would probably go there, and you have Phil Simpson coaching the Jacks, so that's part of that position group. 2 coaches for 3 positions, which is
who would
ideal.
So who would you? So you obviously with Simpson with Dvorak as opposed to Simpson with Terry when they're playing along the front.
I think that's going to change. I think he's going to swing both. I think he's going to go both directions. I think depending on like what down it is and what this, like, as they find out more about this defense and what his strengths are, like you may see Phil Simpson work more with Terry Braden. You may see him work more with Rob Dvorak. I don't know. That's a question for John Butler and what he envisions for this group. We've heard from a lot of other people about what they envision for this defense, but we haven't really heard it from John Butler. So next week we get the chance to ask him about that. Offensively, to answer the same question, it's the wide receivers. And because I'm very intrigued with Da'Keil Shorts, and when we get out there tomorrow, I want to go see him coach. Like we saw him in the Q&A part of his job, which is a small piece, and we shouldn't gather too much and assess him too much based on the fact that he was really, really smooth and in control when he answered questions in front of the media, because there's lots of guys who can do that. And, you still have to be able to coach. But I think based on what we heard there and what Dana Holgorsen says about him and what Matt Rhule has said about him, that he's like a potential game changer as an assistant coach on the field for this offense and for those wide receivers. And I'd go there on the offensive side, because the fact that you can like forget about Ja'Cory Barney in that group, like, oh, look at the transfers they brought in. Look at Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter and Hardly Gilmore. Like, that's really exciting. And they've got Cortez Mills now. Like, he can be a breakout freshman. Don't forget about Ja'Cory Barney, and don't forget about Quinn Clark.
Guys you mentioned, I don't even talk about. But I did put Barney in as my. I don't mention Hadley. I don't mention a lot of those guys, but
Right.
I
Barney's got
mentioned
to
Barney,
be.
that's for
Yeah.
sure. I
So there's
mentioned
a
him.
lot there. And I think that, I heard hearing Buford talk yesterday, Marquise Buford talk about the receivers and going against them in the drills that they've done through the off season. And then now in the first 2 days of practice, like it makes me even more intrigued with what that group might have.
Yeah.
Mitch, is any part of you gun shy about trying about sort of setting expectations for the wide receiver room after
Sure.
we sort of were disappointed in how that played out last year?
Well, we've done that. Yeah, we've gone down this road before. I think there's been a lot of seasons where you've walked into it and looked at the wide receivers and said, yeah, they've really got a lot there. You probably would find that on most college football teams. Like if you just walked out and looked at the wide receivers, I think you're going to come away impressed. Like any Big Ten team or SEC team, like the wide receivers are going to be an impressive looking group, and you can convince yourself pretty easily that they're going to do a lot of damage. They're going to be productive. I tend to think that the talk is real with this group. And I might have said the same thing a year ago and then decided that it was best to reassess when they got halfway through the season. But this is a different cast of characters. They've got a different coordinator. They've got a different assistant, position coach. They've got a quarterback now who has a year under his belt and can deliver the ball to them. I think they've got tight ends who can complement them. All of that factors into how effective the wide receivers are. Like the production of the wide receivers is not something that happens in a vacuum. Like it has to involve all of those other pieces. And I think Nebraska's set up right now for this season to be solid in that area.
I'm just telling you guys, listen to his answer. Mitch, because I didn't ever ask myself that question. I asked you, BC, and was that the only two so far about which
Chase,
position?
maybe?
Oh, maybe for Tim. I think this doesn't. I would start with linebackers if it was just going to be football. I agree with you. Like I think that group is fascinating. Whether it's anybody that plays on the second level, I want to watch those guys. But if I didn't, I may not even go watch any players. I think I would just hang around the staff. I would like to watch. I want to watch Coach Rhule teach coaches, and I want to watch those guys embrace, or whatever the word is, the challenge of having to be connected and come together in a fairly short amount of time to teach, to try to grow this thing going forward. Because I think he was very direct when he said, I want to say that again. It's to find out who can play.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be a directive that he's not only telling us, that he's told them about how he wants this spring to go from a teaching standpoint, right? Like I want to see the coaches. That's who I'm captivated by.
Some of the maybe like an unexpected consequence of no spring game, when Rhule says we don't have a depth chart right now, like you have to take that with a grain of salt if there's a spring game coming up, because you almost have to have a depth chart if there's a spring game. And I know they're still going to have a scrimmage, but it's not going to be open for the public, and you can shuffle guys in and out. You don't have to have a true number one offense in just a scrimmage on some Saturday. They really don't have to have a depth chart this spring. And there's a freedom there that maybe hasn't existed in previous springs. I was interested in what he said, and I wanted to ask him a follow-up, but we ran out of time yesterday. He mentioned going and listening to Dana Holgorsen go through, it was like some concepts or something. Like I have to go back and go back and listen to the audio. But I wanted to ask Rhule about how Phil Snow and having multiple coaches with coordinator experience on the defense and trusting Dana in the way that he does to be in charge, like the head coach of the offense, like how much of that allows him to be even more of a walk around at practice, and like what his practice routine is like in comparison to not just the 2 years at Nebraska, but his other years in college? Like, it probably more resembles his time with the Panthers than anything else because of the staff size, in part because of the staff size, because there's 3 more coaches involved now. Not to mention the coaches who can do work on the field that don't have like the full-time titles. But not just that, but the experience that those coaches have too, and the trust that he has in them. Like, I think he's probably got a different routine every day at practice, and it allows him to. I wonder what he's doing differently minute by minute.
That's our guy, Mitch Sherman from
The Athletic. I got one more for you, Mitch. You're a baseball guy. I won't fast forward to opening day tomorrow, but I want to ask you about Nebraska. Obviously, a buzzsaw coming this weekend with Oregon State and that staff. What part of this, how this season has unfolded through 24 games so far, surprises you the most?
I haven't watched enough of their games recently to say that I am in touch with all that's going on with this team, but it doesn't look like I expect from a Will Bolt team and a Rob Childress team that they would just fight more, that they wouldn't have a game like yesterday. And you've seen this in some other games where they're not ready to go at the start of the game. 3 errors in the first inning yesterday? They're down 5-0 in Manhattan. That doesn't bode well for just like the initial impression that I would have about how excited they are to come out and play every day. So that surprises me because they had momentum coming into this season, an experienced group coming back from a team that was successful in the Big Ten and made it to the postseason. So I would think that they would have a ton of energy. And I don't know if the injuries on the pitching staff have just like taken a lot of their juice away, but it shouldn't. Like, teams have injuries, and yeah, that was a tough one with your ace pitcher, but you still got guys out there who can play. So I'm surprised. I'm surprised by that they don't seem to have the kind of fight that I would expect from a team that's coached by those, because I know those coaches have it, and they've been doing this for a long, long time. And like, the proof's in the pudding. Like, if they're not getting the job done this year, then they're not. There is no excuse. But I'm surprised that they that we're seeing some of the things we have with like defensive breakdowns and early in game like deficits.
Mitch, do you have a Royals opening day ritual or anything you do, or what do you do?
Watch the game. I used to try to watch the game every year in the stadium, and I went a bunch of years on opening day, kind of like how I used to go to Vegas for the Super Bowl with my buddies, and like somehow like these traditions have gone away as my own kids have gotten older. I got a baseball practice to coach our first day outside of the spring tomorrow night, so I won't be able to make the trek to the K tomorrow. But you can bet I'll be sitting there watching it. No tradition other than making sure that I see 9 innings of baseball.
All right, Mitch, what kind of glove do you have?
I think it's a Rawlings. I have the same glove that I've had. I've had my glove for 20 plus years, maybe longer than that. It might even go back to like, I don't think I had this glove in high school, but it's brown, and it's I believe it's a Rawlings. I can send you a shot of it. It gets plenty of use, I'll tell you that, man. I've been wearing it out these last few weeks inside.
I have a 9.5-inch Nakona, and it's not going anywhere.
No, mine's not going anywhere either.
It is. And I may have finally got a Benning. It's just Zoe this time, my 6-year-old, that actually can swing a bat. So I'm
all right.
Pretty pumped around my house.
Man, the softball players have been sharing a facility with them in Gretna this winter. Yeah. They work. They need the boys all need to take a lesson on how hard and efficient they work in the cages.
Yeah, Mitch, full disclosure, I've lost a few bats that trying to hit fast pitch softballs. It is.
I'm just amazed with like I said, their efficiency. Like can they maybe get like 50% more swings in the same amount of time than the
yes
and the guys do?
Yes,
I don't know. Take some notes.
I'm on it.
That's our guy, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, we appreciate it as always. Enjoy opening day and coaching tomorrow outside for the first time.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, guys.